Hello everyone, I've got some more stories for you today. This time something a bit different. We're going to read some Jules Verne, one of the classic authors, and we've got an extract from The Journey to the Centre of the Earth. This is chapter 32, and the extract I'm reading has got a little bit of a introduction just to set the scene for us. And I'm going to read that. I'm also going to read The Kraken by Alfred Lord Tennyson, which I think goes very well together with the subject matter. So, this is chapter 32 by Jules Verne, as translated by Joyce Gard. Professor Lindenbrock has decoded an old manuscript, and his nervous nephew Axel journey across Iceland in search of the way to the centre of the earth. They enlist the help of Hans as a guide, and the three of them descend into a deep crater and, after a series of adventures, discover a subterranean ocean. The explorers build a raft out of trees and set sail. The story was originally written in French. Some translations of this book are old-fashioned and difficult to read nowadays, so if you decide to read the rest of the book, make sure you look for the lovely modern translation. So we'll start the extract now. Sunday, 16th of August. Nothing new. The weather was the same, the wind slightly stronger. The light was as bright as ever. The sea seemed to be infinite, as big as the Mediterranean, or even the Atlantic. And why not, indeed? My uncle tried to take soundings. He tied one of the heaviest picks to the end of the rope, 400 yards long. It did not touch bottom, and we had difficulty in hauling in our line. When at last we recovered the pick, Hans pointed out a row of deep dents, as if the iron had been gripped in a rough vice. I looked at Hans. "Tanda," he said. I did not understand. I looked towards my uncle. But he was in a brown study, and I did not want to disturb him. I turned to Hans again. He opened and closed his jaws, and I understood. "Teeth!" I cried, looking at the iron bar again. Yes, the dents were certainly teeth marks. But what prodigious beast could have made them? Some ancient monster? Fiercer than a shark? More formidable than a killer whale? I could not take off my eyes from the gnawed iron. Was my dream about to become reality? These thoughts weighed on my mind and troubled my sleep. Monday, 17th of August. I started thinking about prehistoric reptiles, trying to recall what I knew about their individual characteristics. They had been in complete command of the seas. They were gigantic and terribly powerful. Our modern alligators and crocodiles, however nasty to meet, would be child's play compared with their ancestors. I shuddered. I had seen a skeleton of one of these saurians in the Hamburg Museum. It was at least 30 feet long. Was it to be our fate to meet one of these creatures in the living flesh? It seemed impossible. But then I had another look at the iron bar, and there were terrible marks plain to be seen. I looked in terror at the sea. My uncle must have shared my thoughts, if not my fears, for he too, after examining the pick, was gazing out over the water. What could have possessed him to take soundings, I thought. He's wakened one of those monsters from his age-long sleep, and now it'll be on the warpath. I took a look at the guns. They were loaded and ready. My uncle saw what I was doing and nodded his approval. I was right. I could see an eddying on the surface. Something was moving, not far away. Tuesday, 18th of August. Evening came, or rather the time for sleep, for there was no night in this ocean, and the cruel light was a weariness to the eyes. Hans was at the tiller, watching during his watch I fell asleep. I was awakened by a violent shock, The raft was lifted bodily from the sea and hurled to a great distance. By extraordinary good fortune, it was not upset. "What is it?" said my uncle, still half asleep. "Have we run aground?" Hans pointed with his finger. We saw a dark mass rising and falling in the sea, about 500 yards away. "An enormous porpoise!" I cried. "Yes," my uncle shouted. "And now I can see an uncommonly large lizard. And over there, see, a monstrous crocodile. Look at its great jaws filled with rows of teeth. It's diving." "A whale!" cried the professor. "Look at its flippers. And now it's blowing." 2 great water jets rose high in the air. We were paralysed with fear. All these sea monsters at once, and the smallest of them could shatter the raft with one snap of its jaws or lash of its mighty tail. Hans came to his senses and started to pull the tiller hard over, when we saw yet more enemies on the other beam, a turtle 40 feet across and a serpent 30 feet long, darting its huge head here and there above the waves. We were cut off. They were drawing near, sweeping round the raft faster than the fastest convoy, making huge rings in the water. I took my gun. But what impression could a bullet make against these armour-plated brutes? We were dumb with terror. We were coming near, to starboard the crocodile, to port the serpent. The other creatures seemed to have vanished. I was about to fire when Hans stopped me. The 2 monsters passed us, 100 yards away, hurling themselves against one another with such frenzy they did not notice the raft. They began an epic fight. We had a ringside seat. It seemed to me that the other beasts were now taking part in the fight. The porpoise, the whale, the lizard, the turtle, and I kept on seeing parts of all of them. I pointed them out to the Icelander, but he only shook his head. "Tva," he said. "Only 2. He thinks there are only 2. "He's right," cried my uncle. "He's been looking through the telescope the whole time." "Are there really only 2? "Yes. The first has the snout of a porpoise and the head of a lizard, and the teeth of a crocodile. That's why we were bewildered. It's the most alarming of the antediluvian reptiles, the Ichthyosaurus." "What about the other?" "Well, that's the serpent with the shell of a turtle, the Plesiosaurus." Now I could see there were only indeed 2 monsters. I saw the bloodshot eye of the Ichthyosaurus, as big as a man's head. The whole creature was at least 100 feet long. As I could judge, when its vertical tail fins came out of the water, its huge jaws had at least 182 teeth, according to the naturalists. The Plesiosaurus was a sort of sea serpent with a short tail and legs sticking out like oars. Its body was covered with a shell, and its neck swayed about like a swan's, towering 30 feet above the waves. These beasts were now locked in a life and death struggle. The violent contortions of their bodies caused mountainous seas which tossed the raft about like a cork. 20 times they were on the point of overturning. Violent hissing like steam whistles pierced our ears. For an hour we watched the furious fight, and still another hour passed without a decision. The battle swayed towards the raft and then away again. We clung on as best we could, our guns loaded, unable to tear ourselves away from the scene of the stupendous struggle. Suddenly both monsters disappeared from below the waves, down the gulf of a mighty whirlpool they had made in their rage. I wondered whether the fight would go on underwater. Then all at once a huge head was thrust up from the sea, the head of the Plesiosaurus. The monster was mortally wounded. Only its head and long neck were visible above the waves. The neck twisted this way and that in violent contortions, lashing the foaming water like a giant whip, wriggling like a severed worm. Water dashed upwards, blinding us, but it was almost the end of the death agony. The reptile's convulsions slackened, and soon its long serpent's body lay still on the calmed waves. We wondered whether the Ichthyosaurus had gone to lick its wounds in its submarine cavern, or whether it was about to emerge again and turn its fury against us, poor humans, on our defenceless raft. A very exciting chapter from Jules Verne there. And also I'm going to read the Kraken, which I think goes quite well with it, sort of a monster's theme, I think. This is by Alfred Lord Tennyson. Below the thunders of the upper deep, far, far beneath in the abysmal sea, is ancient, dreamless, uninvaded sleep. The Kraken sleepeth. Faintest sunlights flee about his shadowy sides. Above him swell huge sponges of millennial growth and height, and far away into the sickly light, from many a wondrous grot and secret cell, unnumbered and enormous polypi winnow with giant fins the slumbering green. There hath he lain for ages, and will lie battening upon huge sea worms in his sleep, until the latter fire shall heat the deep. Then once by man and angels to be seen, in roaring he shall rise and on the surface die. So I hope you've enjoyed those stories there, and keep watching the YouTube channel and our Facebook page for some more stories. I look forward to reading to you soon. Okay, thanks very much, guys.